Hey, what's this photo all about? Planning to do something you can't tell your husband about. It's got George written on it. I confronted my wife Samantha with this, and to my surprise, she was brazen about it. My name is Keith. I'm 32. I work in sales at a travel agency. I married Samantha, the receptionist, 3 years ago after a relentless pursuit. She was my pride, a model-like wife, 5 years younger than me. But my job involved a lot of overtime and business trips, and gradually she seemed to grow dissatisfied. Eventually, I found out that my beloved wife had fallen for a young personal trainer. And there was a photo of the personal trainer and her, left out in the open on the table. I tried to wake her up, getting angry, persuading, talking things out. I thought I did everything I could, but Samantha wouldn't listen. To top it off, she snapped back, saying she didn't want an old man like me. So, we ended up getting a divorce. Knowing her true feelings, I struggled to recover. How did Samantha and I end up like this? Maybe she started to find life with me boring. Even after marriage, I was always busy with overtime and business trips. Essentially, Samantha lived like she was single. And without kids, there wasn't much housework needed. Above all, Samantha had little to no interest in household chores or supporting my work. Early on, she decided to get a part-time job at a clothing company and said, "Keith, I'm busy too, so let's do our own thing." Stunned, but feeling guilty for not being around much, I swallowed my opinions. Samantha went out to work part-time with vigor and was frequently away from home. Since we hadn't been blessed with children yet, I thought it was better than her being home alone. Her clothes and even her appearance began to change after she had been working part-time for a while. Short skirts, heavy makeup. Was this really just for ladies' nights out? My bag feeling proved right. Samantha had been lured out for drinks by her co-workers and ended up fascinated by a young personal trainer. It was too late when I realized. I found his business card after returning from a business trip. I pressed her, demanding, "Explain to me what's going on here." She retorted, "What do you mean? What's going on? You're always away, and living together isn't fun at all, so I'm just having fun on my own." Shocked, I reminded her, "We're married. You're my wife. You shouldn't be playing around like this." But her response was shocking. "Everyone said to choose a husband for his money. I'm young and pretty, and the thought of spending my life with an old man like you is horrifying." Hearing Samantha's true feelings was like a punch to the gut. I thought we were in love and got married, respecting her opinions and cherishing her as my wife. But the Samantha in front of me was like a stranger. To her, I must have been nothing more than an ATM for her to spend the time with the guy. We ended up getting a divorce by mutual agreement. No alimony was involved. Because unbeknownst to me, our bank account was drained. Samantha had poured everything into the guy, leaving our finances almost at zero. I felt empty even as I went through the divorce proceedings. Where did I go wrong? Should I have quit my job for one that let me spend more time with Samantha? Should I have bought more presents, said I love you more? Or should I have worked on my appearance, to be a man Samantha could be proud of? No matter how much I tried to figure it out, I, who had hardly any experience with women, just couldn't understand. Samantha was incredibly thoughtful and bright in personality. In our social group, she was the type everyone adored, and being with her always lifted my spirits. She was slim and model-like, the complete opposite of my average build, and always looked much younger than me. Samantha was undoubtedly the wife I was proud of. But then she called me an old man. While finalizing divorce procedures, I felt like I was branding my life with failure, and honestly, it got me down. Thus, as a man who lost his wife to a young man, I embarked on a life with a divorce under my belt. Honestly, My daily life didn't change much after the divorce. Samantha had always insisted I do my share of the housework, and with constant dining out, the kitchen stayed clean. But the room, devoid of Samantha's belongings, felt desolate, like a monochrome photo, reminding me of my newfound singleness. Unable to recover from the shock of divorce, I threw myself into work to forget Samantha. I eagerly took on sudden business trips and overtime. Then, a colleague named Emily, recently assigned to my department, said, "You'll flip if you keep pushing yourself like this." I used to be the same, placing a coffee on my desk. Her casual kindness meant the world to me, especially in my post-divorce gloom. I thanked her. "I really appreciate your thoughtfulness. Please feel free to ask me anything if you're unsure about the new department." Wanting to return the favor, I took on supporting her work. Turns out she was looking for someone approachable to ask questions. Emily and I started talking several times a day at work, and as we got comfortable, we began having lunch together. Our conversations over meals were surprisingly enjoyable. I loved traveling and spas, and shockingly, so did she. We started visiting popular spas on weekends together. Of course, separately for men and women, but having someone to dine with afterward was a real joy for a divorced man. We'd stop by a bar on the way back, cheerfully toasting. We indulged in drinks and food, liberating our work stress as if competing. Eventually, we began sharing more personal stories, naturally drifting into our pasts. I hesitated to talk about my previous marriage, but something made me want to confide in Emily. Actually, I was married before, but my wife fell for a young guy and left me. Said she didn't want to be with an old man like me. We got divorced just like that. To my surprise, Emily revealed, "I actually had a thing for a young guy in the past. The work targets were so tough, just like your ex-wife." I was speechless, and she said, "Don't worry about me, I've quit that." There was a moment I realized a guy was saying the same sweet things to another woman as he did to me. That woke me up, and luckily I didn't sink too deep. "I hope the other woman has also woken up by now," she shrugged playfully. Seeing her like that, I couldn't help but laugh. No one is 100% correct in life. We learn from our regrets and mistakes, moving forward step by step. Watching Emily, I thought of Samantha for the first time in a while. Our outings and sharing of pasts made Emily and me open up to each other, eventually becoming important partners in both work and life. 2 years after divorcing Samantha, I remarried, and it was to Emily. We had no fancy wedding or honeymoon, but I was content. I had learned from my last marriage that it is not the form of the marriage that is important, but the day-to-day content of married life. Having both failed once, we made an effort to support and appreciate each other. As working spouses, we could easily drift apart. So we made sure to have breakfast together every morning and kept communication going. It was also my way of making amends to my ex-wife, Samantha. I wanted to make Emily happy, the way I couldn't make Samantha. Finally, I could reflect calmly on my marriage with Samantha. On our first wedding anniversary with Emily, we had our ups and downs but managed to come this far together. I splurged on a reservation at an upscale French restaurant for the occasion. "Are you sure we should go somewhere so fancy? I'm so excited." Seeing my wife so happy made me truly joyful. We're both usually so busy with work that there's hardly any time to enjoy a leisurely meal. Together, we looked forward to savoring fine dining to our heart's content. It was supposed to be the perfect anniversary for Emily and me. We had reserved a private room and were relaxing with an aperitif as we waited for our meal to be served. Then, "Excuse me, I've brought the appetizer." The moment I saw the server bringing the dish, my body froze. "Is that Samantha?" I muttered in a barely audible whisper, and she, too, stood there in shock, holding the tray of appetizers. "Keith." As I tried to continue speaking to Samantha, Emily exclaimed in surprise. Samantha, really? She called out to her in the same manner I had. Why does my wife, Emily, know my ex-wife, Samantha? My mind was filled with question marks. Emily, Samantha, and I, none of us knew what to say, and we fell into silence. Samantha still looked young and beautiful, and the elegant uniform suited her well. Though she was surprised to see me, her expression froze even more upon seeing Emily with me. Then, with a strained voice, she said to Emily, "You're the one from that time." Samantha then looked back and forth between us with a look of disbelief. "I thought you had given up on George, and now you've run off with some rich old man." She threw these harsh words at Emily and me. Emily, the target of Samantha's attack, turned pale and fell silent. As I was about to retort on her behalf, Emily gestured to me to stop and said, "I chose Keith because he's always kind and treasures me, sees me as a woman, not just a client. I, who was so unfulfilled, have finally found a place where I can feel at peace. I understand the attraction to George, but leaving someone who truly cares for you is a foolish choice you've made." Of course, Samantha was furious at being lectured. "What are you talking about? You're just a loser who couldn't get George. I'm different from you," she retorted sharply, then slammed the appetizer onto the table and stormed out of the room. Stunned by Samantha's outburst, Emily and I quietly began to eat the appetizer. I then asked Emily, "Would you mind telling me how you and Samantha knew each other?" Emily hesitantly replied, "Well, Samantha and I were both financially supporting the same personal trainer, George. We spent a lot to him. When asked, we offered money so that he can open his own gym, but I overheard him telling Samantha the same thing he told me, that he wanted to be with me. That's when I woke up and was able to return to my true self." Ironically, it was his insincere words to Samantha that had also awakened Emily. From her behavior, it seemed Samantha had not yet woken up from her obsession with the trainer. I felt a concern for her, speaking little. Our first wedding anniversary with Emily, supposed to be a joyous occasion, had unexpectedly become a time to reflect on my past marriage. The course menu that followed was delicious, but predictably, Samantha didn't return to serve us. However, Samantha's hurtful remark about me being an old man reopened old wounds in my heart. I wondered inwardly if someone like me could really make anyone happy. Feeling downcast, when Emily asked, "You're not eating. Is something wrong?" I replied with self-doubt, "Maybe if you weren't with someone like me, you wouldn't have to hear such awful things from Samantha on our anniversary. I'm sorry. Our married life must seem so dull, right?" Emily shook her head softly and said, "I chose you, Keith, not some young flashy guy. You're genuine and substantial. Being here with you today is the happiest day of my life." Tears streaming down my face, I nodded in agreement. Grateful for having her in my life, we thoroughly enjoyed our meal and paid the bill. Before leaving, I approached the reception. "I'd like to thank the waitress who served us first today." Reluctantly emerging from the kitchen, Samantha listened as I said, "I've always wanted to apologize to you. I'm sorry for leaving you alone in the apartment, for refusing your home-cooked meals because of work, for not properly acknowledging your struggles. You must have felt out of place in our home. I regret not realizing that as your husband, but I'm sure someone will understand and appreciate you. Samantha, please find happiness this time." As I bowed deeply, I heard sobbing. Looking up, I saw Samantha crying like a child. And then, from behind me, I heard the sound of someone sniffling. Behind me, Emily was also weeping. Realizing my past mistakes and weaknesses through 2 marriages, I had finally expressed my long-held feelings to Samantha. Resolved not to make anyone cry again, Emily and I headed home. "Mom, is that all the stuff I'm taking to daycare?" I asked Emily, who was busy getting our child ready. Since then, Emily and I had been blessed with a child, and we were leading a busy life as working parents. Though I try hard in parenting, I'm often scolded by Emily for being unhelpful. But as a husband and father, I'm striving more than ever for my family. And Emily, no matter how busy, always makes sure to pack a lunch for me. It's my supportive wife and lovely child that keep me going. I'm determined to cherish Emily, who fell in love with me for who I am, for the rest of my life. Hey Joe, go hit on that girl. Go pick up that blonde beauty with your high school level French. Just go, hurry up. At a hotel lobby where our high school reunion was being held, I saw a beautiful blonde woman, my classmate, who looked down on me for only having a high school education, ordered me to approach her. No matter how much I refused, he kept forcefully pushing me to do it. He seemed to want to laugh at my discomfort. But he didn't know. Fine, but that girl is my secretary. That she wasn't a stranger. And what I am doing now. I am Joe. I grew up in a single-parent household with my younger brother. Though we grew up together, it wasn't really the case during our early childhood. My brother, Mike, wasn't very physically strong and had repeated hospital stays since he was young, so our mother was always occupied with him, leaving me alone many nights. I was scared and lonely during those nights alone. But I could never say that to my mother, who was working desperately while caring for my sick brother. Besides, I could bear it a little, thinking it was all to help my brother. Nevertheless, being alone at home with nothing to do, I started to want to lighten my mother's burden and naturally began to help with household chores. At first, I was just copying what I saw, so I ended up adding too much detergent to the washing machine and troubling my mother, and my folding of laundry was terribly done. I once scorched a shirt trying to iron it. There was also a time when I tried to make pancakes and ended up spilling the batter in the sink, leaving it covered in flour. I once clogged the vacuum cleaner and waited in tears for my mother to come home. Eventually, I even cut my finger with a knife and wrapped it in bandages to get through the situation. When my mother came home, she was so pale and rushed me to the hospital. Looking back, she must have been terrified. And now, I think, what on earth was I doing? But despite all that, my mother never really got angry with me. She empathized with my loneliness and said, "You were trying to help, weren't you? Thank you, but please, no more dangerous stuff. Just knowing you care is enough for me," as she stroked my head. Of course, I wasn't allowed to touch knives or irons anymore, and I could only use things she taught me. But as I gradually learned to do more chores, I felt like I was really helping her, and that made me very happy. My dad left us right after my brother was born, running off with another woman he had an affair with. I used to think he was a doting father and I liked him, but after seeing him betray and leave my mother, I've always disliked him. My mother worked tirelessly, not just at her job, but also taking care of my brother and still keeping an eye on me. I can only imagine how busy and difficult it was for her. Though we got child support from my father, because of my brother's medical expenses, life was pretty tough. I wanted to do my best for my family. With that determination, I kept adding to the chores I could handle. This was around the time I became a middle schooler. I ended up in the same class as a student named Steve. Steve was the center of our class, the kind of popular guy who's always surrounded by people, regardless of gender, with friends among upper and lower classmates. "Hey, anyone up for cinema today? There's a new place near the station. I heard the staff is pretty." Once he suggests it, my classmates say, "Sounds good, let's go." Why not invite the whole class? Right, everyone. Everyone, let's meet at the cinema near the station after school. Before I know it, there's already a plan for the whole class to go to cinema. I got past exam papers from a senior. Seriously, way to go, Steve. Typical Steve. Having lots of connections sure is handy. Thanks, Steve. With these, we can avoid failing. Hey, how about we all study together afterwards? Oh, then come to my place. I've got a new video game. We can take a break and I'll show it to you. Wow, I want to go. Steve, who somehow got his hands on past exam papers, is revered like a god and proudly shows official. He's always surrounded by people and loves to have a wild time. I find it a bit hard to get along with him, who's the complete opposite of me. You should come too. No, I don't have money for cinema. What? It's just cinema. You get an allowance, right? Sorry, I really can afford it. At first, I was also invited. But since my family didn't have much money, I never accepted the invitations, and eventually, he stopped inviting me. Honestly, I found Steve hard to deal with, so I didn't really care. However, it seems Steve didn't like being turned down by me. Hey, isn't that guy just all about studying and acting like he's better than us, like a school committee nerd, acting all introverted despite himself? Yeah, I get it. He always turns down your invitations, acting all high and mighty. To us outgoing folks, that's just weird. Anyway, Steve, forget that loner. Let's go out somewhere today. Sounds good, let's do that. Before I knew it, I was labeled as an introvert and became an outcast. But it wasn't just me, there were several others as well. Apparently, there were quite a few classmates who couldn't keep up with the vibe and energy, and all of them were inevitably labeled as introverts. Soon, our class seemed to be split into extroverts and introverts. Ironically, despite hoping classes would change as we moved up grades, Steve and I ended up in the same class for all 3 years. By the time we reached 9th grade, we had to take the lead in all school events, guiding the younger students. Steve, who loved festivals and events, was thrilled that he could finally be the center of attention and organize things in his final year. Everyone, what should we do for the school festival? We can do food and drink like high schoolers, so why not just stick with a safe exhibition again this year? No way, we have a stage, so we should do something that stands out. How about a play? It'll be fun and definitely liven things up. Steve starts the discussion enthusiastically, but listening to him, it just seems like he wants to stand out and make noise, which is kind of depressing. If we do a play, it'll take a lot of time on the day, and rehearsing will be tough. Maybe an exhibition would be better. Someone in the class timidly suggests this, but Steve retorts, "What? We were just getting into the idea of a play. You got a problem with that?" "No, not really." "Well, it's fine. If you can't keep up, you're just in the way. Let's just have fun with those who can enjoy it." Steve's idea of a play isn't about a story, but more like imitating a TV comedy show, making fun of someone. It's obviously going to be a poor imitation and not particularly funny, and resorting to inside jokes when it doesn't get laughs will only make the atmosphere heavier. Initially, classmates who agreed with Steve's plan gradually started saying, yeah, sounds fun, I guess. It'll be exciting, right? It'll definitely be exciting. But it seemed too late to back out now, as they were slightly hesitant and Steve was on a roll, leaving everyone sweating nervously. Then, a voice called out, "Steve." "What's up, Mr. Anderson? That play of yours, I don't find it particularly interesting. What part do you think is funny?" What are you talking about?" Mr. Anderson, our class teacher, said, looking around. "It seems like hardly anyone is really on board with this play. Are you aware of that?" Having fun is important, of course, but this festival isn't just for you. It's something we all create together. It has to be something everyone agrees on and enjoys. Thinking only about your own fun lacks consideration for others. A true leader is someone who can take everyone's opinions into account," he advised the irritated Steve. "What's with the sermon? Cut it out." Initially, Steve was defiant, but it seemed to shock him that no one supported him at that moment. "Freaking unbelievable. Fine, you guys do some boring exhibition then. I'm not participating." He snapped back and stormed out of the classroom. Some students worriedly followed him, but I was moved by Mr. Anderson's words. In the end, Steve didn't become the leader. As a class representative, I took the helm, listened to everyone's opinions, and we settled on a safe exhibition, which turned out to be a great success. Then came the morning of the high school entrance exams. "What, Mike is?" "Yes, I'll be there right away." Hearing my mother on the phone, her voice filled with panic, I heard that Mike's condition had suddenly worsened. She told me to go on with my exam, but I couldn't focus and ended up forfeiting. I rushed to the hospital and waited for hours outside the surgery room. Mike, thanks to the doctor's efforts, managed to pull through. However, since I only applied to one public high school, I had no other options left. Steve, learning about this, later found me and laughed mockingly. "A straight A student like you taking a gap year before high school. Ha, that's just perfect. You should have gone to the exam instead of the hospital. You couldn't do anything there anyway. That's just stupid. Man, you're hilarious. Haha." Hearing this, all the feelings I had bottled up inside me just exploded. Is it fun for you? Huh? I'm asking if you enjoy continually mocking others. Enough with looking down on people. In a sudden impulse, I grabbed Steve, ready to strike him in a mix of shock and anger. But at the last moment, Mr. Anderson stopped me and took me to another room. "You're kidding me. You won't get away with this." Steve's shouts lingered for a while. Mr. Anderson quietly listened to my story. He empathized with my past struggles and even shed tears. "It must have been hard. You felt lonely, didn't you?" Seeing his tears, I felt a slight relief in my heart. Did I make a mistake? Mike's well-being was more important than the exam. When I heard his condition worsened, I just couldn't stay put. The exam seemed so trivial, but still. "You don't regret it, but you feel resolved, don't you?" I nodded, and Mr. Anderson smiled kindly at me. "It's normal to feel that way, but prioritizing Mike over the exam wasn't a mistake. Probably, if you had chosen the exam, your worry for Mike would have prevented you from performing your best." Mr. Anderson, remember, you can always reach out to me when times are tough. I'm on your side. It's going to be all right. Saying that, he gave me his address and phone number. I wasn't in a family situation where I could ask for a cell phone, so my communication with Mr. Anderson naturally became through letters. I made it a point to always write to Mr. Anderson whenever something happened, ensuring I never neglected our correspondence. Mr. Anderson also sent back thoughtful responses every time. Not only that, but he never failed to send Christmas cards and midsummer greetings as well. Fast forward 15 years since I graduated from middle school. An invitation to a class reunion arrived. A reunion for our 9th grade class. Looking at the invitation, I didn't feel much excitement. However, the line "Mr. Anderson, our former teacher, is also expected to attend" made me decide to go. On the day, the reunion took place in the banquet hall of a hotel. "Joe, long time no see." "Hey, it's Joe, the class representative. Been a while, hasn't it?" "Yeah, long time. How's everyone been?" "Aw, you look great too, Joe." Talking with my classmates turned out to be more enjoyable than I expected. Everyone remembered me as a class representative from back then, and we had a great time reminiscing about those days. As we shared our recent life updates and chatted, I noticed one particular group seemed exceptionally lively. "Over there, they're having quite the time." "Jay, that's Steve's group." "Ah, I see." It seemed Steve was the center of that group. Even from a distance, the snippets of conversation I heard suggested they were still as childish and rowdy as in middle school. I thought about avoiding them, but then accidentally made eye contact with Steve. As he approached with a smirk, I suppressed my urge to flee and faced him. "Hey, is that you, Joe?" "Yeah, it is." I knew it. It's Joe, the high school dropout. "What's with the suit? Doesn't suit you at all. Looks like you're playing dress-up, which is kind of funny. You should stick to more low-end attire. It suits you better." Irritated by his immediate rudeness, I replied, "Unfortunately, I have work after this." Then he said, "What, you, a high school dropout, working in a suit? Haha, Don't put on airs. What kind of workaholic are you? Working for some evil company. Oh, manual, typical for a dropout. Only able to get picked up by those kinds of firms. Me. I'm a stockbroker. Something to brag about to everyone, and it's the best. Every word from Steve was unpleasant, and I said, "Oh, that's great. Well, I have to go," and left the scene as if fleeing. But he called out, "Wait up. What's it like working as a dropout? Tell me in detail. I'll use it for future reference." "Come on, Joe, please. Are you mad because I mentioned the dropout thing? I'm sorry. Okay, let's talk. We're pals, right? It's a reunion after all. Don't try to run away. That's bold of you. But wait, I'm forgiving." So I let it slide. "Come on, let's have a drink and not run away anymore." Throughout the reunion, Steve kept appearing out of nowhere to bother me wherever I went. "Please, just stop." Even when I asked him to stop, he just grinned and kept following me. As the reunion was nearing its end, I was concerned that Mr. Anderson hadn't shown up yet. Was he running late? Had something happened? Deciding to head to the bathroom, I stepped outside the venue, only to have Steve follow me again. "What's up? Leaving already?" "No, just going to the bathroom." "To the bathroom? All right, I'll come with you." Sigh. As I was reluctantly heading to the bathroom, thinking how truly annoying this was getting, I noticed a blonde woman sitting on a sofa in the lobby. Wow, a blonde beauty. Maybe she's a guest staying here. She's seriously gorgeous. Steve, getting excited all by himself, then turned to me and said, "Hey Joe, you go hit on her." "What? Why? Come on, man. Try picking up that blonde beauty with your high school level French." Steve approached me with a smirk, his phone gripped in his hand. It was clear he intended to film me awkwardly speaking to the woman in broken French, getting swiftly rejected, and then share it to mock me with everyone. Shocked and disgusted by his unchanged behavior since middle school, I felt too appalled to say anything. "Sorry, but that's impossible." As I tried to walk past him to the bathroom, Steve grabbed my arm with all his strength and urged, "Come on, just do it. Hurry up." Sighing, I asked Steve to let go of my arm and said, "Fine, but that woman is actually my secretary." He responded in disbelief, "What? What are you talking about? Have you lost your mind?" Then, the woman seemed to notice us and gracefully walked over. Steve tensed up immediately and pushed me again, saying, "Come on, stop talking nonsense and go talk to her." "Mr. Parker, you're earlier than expected. Are you done already?" she asked me. Steve was taken aback by her question to me. "It might take a little longer. The teacher I wanted to meet hasn't arrived yet. Ellie, are you still okay with time? Not getting bored?" "Yes, I'm fine. I just came early. I'll wait while having some coffee." "Thanks, that's a relief." Wait, Joe, what's going on here? You actually know this beautiful woman?" "Huh, I told you so." "No way, I didn't hear that." "Well, I did say it just a moment ago." Steve looked back and forth between us in confusion. Ellie, my secretary, also tilted her head, wondering what was being said. "Oh, Joe, is that you, Joe?" Then, a man appeared. "Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson. Hey, you're Steve, right? Long time no see." It's been a while." It was Mr. Anderson, our 9th grade teacher. Yes, I'm glad to see both of you. Especially you, Joe. I heard you went to France from your letters, so I was actually worried whether you'd make it today." "France?" Steve tilted his head at Mr. Anderson's words. "Yeah, I didn't go to a high school in the US, but right after that I moved to France and attended high school there." "What? I continued with college there too, and now I work while traveling between America and France." "What does that mean?" "My mother remarried right after I graduated from middle school. He was my brother Mike's primary physician and a renowned cardiologist. Mike had a weak heart, So with the help of my stepfather, we went to France for his surgery. My mother and I followed along, and we started living there. There, I attended high school and later enrolled in a prestigious university. During my university years, I started a company that eventually took off, and now it has grown into a considerable business with over 100 employees. What? Starting a business? As a student, aren't you aware? In universities there, it's quite common for students to start businesses. I met my girlfriend there, and we started the business together. I handed Steve my business card. The company name written on it was a publicly listed one, something Steve, as a stockbroker, couldn't possibly be unaware of. Moreover, it had recently become a popular stock due to its strong performance. No way. Recognizing the company, he was at a loss for words. Indeed, I didn't attend a high school in America, but in the business world, that doesn't matter. Nobody cares about your educational background, whether you're a middle school dropout, a high school graduate, or a college graduate. A president is a president. You're judged by your work. Steve stood there, unable to say anything, his head bowed. Why? Why are you always ahead of me? Steve muttered this weakly. I've always resented you since middle school. I was raised in a single-parent home too, without a father, but unlike your family, my mother was the kind who changed boyfriends every few months. There were always strangers staying at our house, and I felt like I had no place there. I spent nights out, trying not to go home. So, I was envious of you, even though your brother was sick. Your family was supportive and close. Steve, you always had better grades and were the class representative, trusted by teachers. In contrast, I was just spinning my wheels, trying not to let anyone find out about my home life, and ended up being labeled as frivolous. I've been scared since then, always fearing betrayal. Mocking you was my way of venting my frustration. Grades are something I worked for, and being class representative was just because no one else volunteered. Living honestly earns trust, and my being mocked isn't a good excuse for your insecurity. Yeah, I know. When you got angry at me for the first time, after I mocked you for not going to high school, I finally understood. I have done something irreversible, but by then, it was too late to apologize. I planned to apologize if you came today, but seeing you so happy made me realize how pointless my life has been, and it just made me angry. All I could do was hold my head in my hands. While there might be some room for sympathy regarding Steve's family situation, everything else was honestly just a result of his own actions. I had genuinely suffered and been hurt by his behavior for a long time. Steve said he envied me, but I felt the same about him. He was always the center of attention in the class, surrounded by friends. Constantly in the midst of laughter and smiles, I often envied that. In contrast, while I did feel my mother's love, I also experienced more loneliness than most, and being naturally bad at socializing, I was labeled as serious. I never wanted to be class representative. It was Steve who labeled me as an introvert and pushed that onto me. When I conveyed this, he looked at me in surprise. I was never really the serious type by nature. I was just a kid who suppressed my own feelings to distract from the loneliness. That's why I always envied you, Steve, being bright and the center of attention. Why? Why didn't you ever say anything? Why would I? You never said anything to me either. That's true, but I had no idea you felt that way. You always looked expressionless. Just because I don't show it on my face doesn't mean I didn't feel anything inside. I have happy moments and unpleasant ones too. It's normal. Jer, I guess so. I thought you always looked okay, so I justified to myself that it was fine to do or say anything to you. I'm really sorry. I was wrong. I'm the one who should apologize for always ignoring you and not verbally expressing my discomfort. I should have made my feelings clearer. I'm sorry too. After 15 years, we both looked down, offering mutual apologies. Then, Mr. Anderson stood in front of us. Both of you have grown up so much compared to those days. Steve, It's commendable that you realized your mistakes on your own. Admitting you were wrong is often hard, but that doesn't change the fact that you hurt Joe. That's something you should deeply reflect on. Yes. Joe, too. That day you showed your emotions, instead of just observing things from afar. I was really happy. It's wonderful that even now, amidst these unresolved feelings, you can acknowledge your faults. Yes. In life, there are many people we may not get along with. In fact, most might be like that. Yet, in living, we sometimes have to understand each other. For me, both Steve and Joe are precious students. Not just you two, but all students I've been involved with. Their happiness is my happiness. You two have resolved a burden in your hearts today. That makes me very happy too. You both are thoughtful and outstanding students. I'm proud of you. Feeling almost too flattered, I couldn't help but laugh. Steve seemed to feel the same way, and Ellie watched us with a warm smile. Joe, over here. Steve, sorry to keep you waiting. No, I just got here too. Is takeout okay? Yeah, thanks. Since that reunion, Steve and I somehow started keeping in touch. At first, there was awkwardness, and our conversations hardly lasted. But now, we can talk like normal friends and even go out for drinks. We often share stories about our past. He told me about how he became independent after high school, earned scholarships for college, and landed a job at a major securities firm. It must have been tough getting into a big securities firm. Yes, it was. I did a lot of preparation and spent days stressing over entry sheets. That's amazing. I admire his effort, but Steve laughs it off, saying, "No, compared to you, I'm just a minnow. You struggled in a foreign country, right? Your determination and resolve to start a business while still a student is way more impressive than anything I've done." We started inviting each other out more often, and now we meet about once a week. Because of this, we've talked about things we never could have imagined discussing in middle school. One such topic is what you'd call romance talk. What? A proposal? Yeah, I've been with Ellie for years now, but our business partnership has lasted even longer. Plus, she's French, so I thought maybe something more romantic would be appropriate. I overthought it and couldn't make a move, but with the business on track, I didn't want to keep her waiting any longer. I can't believe she chose you. Hey, what's that supposed to mean? Just kidding, sorry. I confided in Steve about wanting to propose to Ellie. He listened seriously, despite his jokes, and helped me research things like restaurants with a night view and the meaning behind the number of roses in a bouquet. When my proposal was successful and we decided to get married, Steve cried and rejoiced as if it was his own happiness, saying, "Congratulations, I'm so happy for you." Since then, Steve has stopped making snide remarks. He's reevaluated his behavior and character in both work and personal life, softening his demeanor and apparently becoming quite popular. However, he's confessed that his mother's behavior left a deep trauma, making it hard for him to trust women. Marriage seems like a distant dream for me, but hey, I'm totally content with my life as it is now. Steve spoke carefreely, and it was refreshing to see. I don't believe marriage is everything, but I do hope his emotional wounds heal even a little. Soon after, I married Ellie. Among the guests were, of course, Mr. Anderson and Steve. Congratulations, be happy. Thanks. Let's catch up for a drink once things settle down. I'll get in touch. Sure, I'll contact you too. Mr. Anderson watched us laugh together with a pleased look. Back in middle school, I never imagined understanding Steve to this extent. Maybe, even in the deepest conflicts, people can understand each other if they open up. Ellie and I, from different countries and backgrounds, have become a family. Steve, whom I once detested, is now a close friend. Not making assumptions and continuing dialogue is vital, both in work and personal life. I plan to live by this lesson moving forward. You're really useless. How many years have you been working for this company? I'm sorry. How many times has she berated me today? I look up fearfully, and there is the manager with angry eyes. I really wished I had someone more competent. Fix this, okay? Yes. She handed me the document that she claimed had many errors. As I left, I heard my coworkers snickering behind me. I've been with the company for 15 years. I was utterly bewildered when I was suddenly demoted, but I came to terms with it. My new manager, Claire, a woman younger than me, was especially harsh to certain employees. It seemed she often bullied or harassed certain employees. Moreover, she was extremely emotional. Having her as my manager, it couldn't be worse. Even when I examined the document she claimed had errors, I could hardly find any. Could it be a company-wide scheme to harass me? I sighed. Recently, due to economic downturns, my company has been encouraging early retirements. On top of that, they've been demoting employees they want to let go or harassing them to make them quit. They really played dirty. I sighed, placing the document on my desk. I looked at a photo of my beloved wife, Jennifer. Seeing her bright and radiant smile made me sigh even more. How did someone like me end up with her? My wife Jennifer, unlike me, who only finished high school, was a top-performing college graduate. She had a promising career trajectory. Yet, for some reason, she chose to resign from her job and followed me after I was demoted. I was getting tired of work anyway. I've been thinking of quitting for a while, so the timing was just right. Why not? Our new place is famous for tourism, and I think living a relaxed life in the countryside could be nice. Since moving here, I've been more proactive about doing chores at home, but Jennifer has taken the lead in handling many household duties even while working part-time at the supermarket. Moreover, even when I vent about my daily office troubles, she listens intently without showing any annoyance, nodding along with genuine concern. Sometimes she'd exclaim, "What's up with that?" and would side with me, condemning my overbearing Claire. When I was working full-time, I couldn't do much as a wife, but now I'll do everything I can. She was a thoughtful, kind-hearted wife I could be proud of and respect. But to be honest, I felt inferior to her. What a pity for her to have a husband like you. Suddenly becoming aware, I turned to look behind me. Claire, you even have a picture of her on your desk. You really adore your wife, huh? And rumors say she was more competent at her job than you. What a waste, making her quit and dragging her all the way to this rural place like Nebraska. With a sneering and sleazy smile, she stared at Jennifer's photo. Your wife really has it tough, doesn't she? Wouldn't it be better for her if you two divorced? Holding back my rage, I bit my lip. Maybe I have been a burden to my wife. But it's none of her business. If it were just about me, I could endure it. But I couldn't stand her talking about my wife. I didn't want to hear that. I felt the urge to let my anger take control. I wanted to shout back at her. Those thoughts consumed me. But if I did and ended up getting fired, it would only cause more trouble for Jennifer. Still, I didn't want to let her remarks go. I clenched my fists, taking a deep breath. Then, the office phone rang. I quickly picked it up. Yes, this is Bob. Hey, I'm at the front desk right now. Can I come over? Huh, Jennifer, why are you here? That call really caught me off guard. Jennifer, who was supposed to be at home, was on the line. You forgot your lunch at home today, right? So, I brought it for you. Yeah, I did forget it, but I texted you that I'd just buy something. I know. But since I was shopping near the office, I thought I'd drop it off. Oh, thanks, but I'm busy with work, so head home soon, okay? I know. With that, she hung up. As I put down the receiver, I locked eyes with Claire, who looked taken aback. "Your wife came all the way to the office just to deliver lunch. That's unbelievable. I didn't expect her to either. Sigh, can't get a promotion, treats his wife like a maid. You're such a loser." Whispering those words, she walked away. I covered my ears for a moment, glaring at her retreating figure. "Hello, I'm Bob's wife." In no time, Jennifer entered the office. Seeing her, I was at a loss for words. She was in her usual attire, but it was clear she dressed up for the occasion, wearing a beautiful pastel-colored dress. Jennifer has a great figure. The dress perfectly accentuated her curves. Her makeup, subtle in its soft hues, perfectly accentuated Jennifer's attractive face. Isn't Bob's wife a beauty? She's got such great style. Really stands out. Whispering among themselves, some male employees shared their thoughts, but Jennifer shot them a smile and quickly made her way over to me. "What a beautiful wife you have." Hearing that voice and looking in that direction, the department head seemed taken aback as she stared at Jennifer. Seems like even she, as another woman, can't ignore Jennifer's beauty. "Here, you forgot your lunch. I packed all your favorites." She handed me the lunch with a cheerful smile. "Come on. I know she usually just tosses in last night's dinner leftovers. And she doesn't hesitate to add mushrooms, which I despise." I was wondering what got into her today, being overly pleasant. Then, "Ahem, excuse me, ma'am," Claire's voice rang out. She strutted over, crossing her arms in front of us with a sour look. "This kind of behavior is disruptive. We're trying to work here. Oh, I just brought lunch for my husband. Oh, and here, everyone can have some. I made them. Homemade." My wife handed her a beautifully wrapped package of cookies. The corners of Claire's mouth twitched upon hearing my wife's words. It's well known among the staff that Claire, besides having no taste buds, is also a terrible cook. One employee who was secretly dating her even broke up with her over it, which became quite the office gossip. And I didn't miss it. The mischievous glint in Jennifer's eyes as she smiled at the department head. She's intentionally doing something she knows will irk her. "Everyone, I also have homemade cookies for you. Thank you for always taking care of my husband." Swiftly turning on her heel, Jennifer began distributing cookies to the employees. But watching her, I felt my stress levels rising and began sweating. I was sure this was some sort of retaliation aimed at Claire. I'd always talked about Claire at home, but I never imagined Jennifer would come to retaliate. "Enough of this. Do you think acting all sweet will get your husband treated any better here?" Claire yelled at Jennifer, throwing the cookie she received from her on the floor. Some male employees watching frowned. "You might have gone a bit overboard there." One tried to calm her down, but her anger only grew. She stormed up to Jennifer and shouted, "This is a place of work. Don't hand out unknown snacks to the employees. How could you? This is so uncalled for." Tears welled up in Jennifer's eyes, though they seemed somewhat insincere. Jennifer is the kind who'd immediately snap back if she's yelled at for no good reason. "Hey, that's way out of line, Claire. That's just way over the top." The employees rushed to my wife's side, hurling criticism at Claire one after another. Bob's wife was just being considerate and handed out cookies to us. And after throwing them away, you yell at her. What's the problem here?" At that moment, a voice was heard from the lounge. It was the vice president. "What's going on here?" Seemed he'd caught wind of the commotion. Today, the vice president, who was visiting from the head office in New York, came over to see what the fuss was about. This is..." Claire was pale as a ghost. Then, the younger employees began to explain the situation in unison. "Vice President, it was awful." Claire yelled at Bob's wife. She was just delivering lunch to Bob and gave us cookies on the side. The male employees exchanged glances. That's what I'm saying. That's the issue. In response to the infuriated Claire, the vice president said, "What seems to be the problem here? Let's discuss this in the conference room, shall we?" "Yes, sir." With a weak nod, Claire followed the vice president to the conference room located beside the floor. "Serves her right." Standing beside me in astonishment, Jennifer muttered. Soon after, it was decided that Claire would be transferred to a different department. It was a demotion in all but name. It came to light that she had been bullying employees, like with the recent incident with Jennifer. As a result, she was to be punished. Even though it was clear she had been acting under higher orders, targeting undesirable employees like us. "Hey, why don't you quit that place?" After I went on about Claire, Jennifer smiled and said that. "But what would we do? You're working part-time, and if I quit, can we even make ends meet? We'll be fine. I've already spotted a new job opportunity. The company I used to work for is hiring mid-career employees. They have a branch in the next town over. When I mentioned you to my old colleague, they said they'd love to have you. Well, you'd start with an interview." "That's a relief. But didn't you say you left because you were exhausted from your previous job?" "I thought about our future. Balancing a career and raising a child seemed tough, right? So considering we want kids, I felt I couldn't stay there. I discussed it with my manager and left. When I came here, I wasn't pregnant yet, but lately, I've been feeling off, so I went to the doctor." "You're pregnant?" "Yes, 3 months in," Jennifer whispered with a shy smile. "I've been asked if I'd come back once our child is old enough for daycare. My old manager promised to create a more accommodating environment for working moms. She looked so happy talking about it." "So, just ditch your current job. A company that bullies its employees will go under eventually." I thought for a moment, but sometimes you need to take things in stride, and that's what I felt. "You're right. I'll ditch it. I'll give that interview a shot at your old company. It's not easy to decide to leave a company you've been with for a long time." But her casual use of the word ditch made it easier not to overthink things. Seeing her refreshing smile, I couldn't help but smile too. I hadn't imagined things turning around so favorably, especially with Jennifer's support. Moreover, our new family member is growing inside Jennifer. For our child's sake, I have to keep moving forward. I'll let my old manager know. "Thanks a bunch." I nodded firmly at Jennifer's words. I felt like I am reminded of her strength. From now on, I too was fired up to work harder and do my best for my family. The view from the plane headed to Hawaii was breathtaking, but I never expected that my ex-girlfriend from middle school would be sitting next to me. On top of that, she started bringing up the past, going on and on about how worthless I am. And then, without me even asking, she talked about how happy her life is now, how she's married to a rich man, and how much she's needed by her husband. Just then, an announcement came over the intercom. "Is there anyone on board who can fly a plane? It seems there was a serious issue. It's shocking that they're looking for a pilot, not a doctor." Passengers began to realize the gravity of the situation, with murmurs of, "Pilot, is this plane okay?" Then, a flight attendant, while looking around, saw me and exclaimed, "Oh, it's you." That's when an incident to shut my ex-girlfriend up occurred. My name is Jake. Ever since I was a kid, I had an unusual fascination with airplanes. To be honest, I was interested in anything that could fly. Seeing birds and insects soaring freely in the sky always looked beautiful and cool. I wished I could fly too, thinking if I tried hard enough, maybe I'd grow wings. I genuinely believed that. But sadly, no matter how hard I'd ride, wings didn't sprout. When I was 5 and feeling pretty down about it, I saw an airplane for the first time. It was amazing to see this non-living chunk of metal flying through the sky. It happened during a family vacation with my parents. That gigantic bird soaring in the sky left such an impression. It became a symbol of freedom for me. Since then, my affection shifted from cars and trains to airplanes. I became a boy who deeply loved airplanes. I'd memorize names of aircraft and airlines, spending my days looking at them in books. Seeing my passion, my parents would drive me to the airport every week, although they didn't take me on a flight. They thought seeing planes in action would be better for me. My parents and my much younger siblings never gazed at planes with the same admiration I did, but they always listened with a smile when I excitedly talked about them. Naturally, my dream was to become a pilot. I wanted to control an airplane and fly in the skies. It was the first dream I ever had in my life. Even now, I think it's a bit unusual for a kid to have such a realistic dream from the get-go. My dad would say, to become a pilot, you have to study hard, and I was the bright student for my age. I felt that studying was a small price to pay if it meant flying a plane someday. My teachers always said, the secret to improving in your studies is to have a clear vision of your future dream. I truly felt that way. If what it took to become a pilot was studying, then I'd gladly dive into my studies. Moreover, when my dad said, I heard that if you have cavities, you can't become a pilot, I brushed my teeth harder than anyone else. I reckon I got so good at it that I could have become a dental hygienist. Mind you, it's not true for all pilots that having cavities is a deal breaker. Only those flying certain fighter jets can have them due to the effects of air pressure. If someone said that you need to be physically fit to be a pilot, then I'd double down on weight training and exercise. Anyway, my childhood was more about planes than playing around. Once I reached middle school, I began seriously considering my path towards becoming a pilot. I believed that without attending a reputable high school or college, I wouldn't be able to fly an airplane, so I continued to work hard in both my studies and physical activities. During middle school years, I was also concerned about my friendships. I made an effort to get along with everyone, trying not to make unnecessary enemies. While I avoided people who brought unnecessary stress, I aimed to connect with as many people as possible, absorbing everything I could and making it a part of me. Though it's a bit embarrassing to say, I was relatively popular among girls. Getting attention from girls became more frequent, and honestly, it felt good. Guy friends would ask how I got so much attention from the girls, but since I wasn't studying or exercising to be popular, I couldn't give them a satisfying answer. Amidst all this, a girl confessed her feelings and wanted to date me. Her name was Susan. She was the most beautiful girl in our grade, popular among both students and teachers. Being approached by such a beauty, I was over the moon and couldn't find a reason to refuse her. I said yes without thinking seriously. It was my first time dating a girl, and I had no idea that Susan would be so much trouble. She became upset whenever I talked to someone, a male or female, whom she didn't know. I'd often buy her something just to improve her mood. She demanded things like deleting contacts of the girls from my phone and expected immediate replies to her texts. She was incredibly self-centered and seldom thought of others. Out of the blue, she'd say things like, I want you to be my ideal boyfriend, and this cut into my study and exercise time. She insisted, you should spend every weekend just for me. Oh, and you're paying for our dates, of course. It's terrible to make your girlfriend pay. Such demands were too much for a middle school student. Over time, being with Susan felt increasingly suffocating. One summer during middle school, my father tragically passed away in an accident. Losing my dad, who looked forward to and had high hopes for my future more than anyone else, was really tough for me in middle school. Often, I would see my mom, once vibrant and full of life, look worn out and lifeless. Although I wanted to cheer her up, I was so overwhelmed with my own feelings that I couldn't offer much help. Our family was engulfed in profound grief. After losing our beloved father, a man we all admired, every one of us had to fight harder to live our lives. My mom, who had been a stay-at-home mom until then, started working outside. Consequently, she couldn't take care of my younger brother anymore, so I stepped in. Naturally, this meant less time for studying and sports, but it was a necessary sacrifice. It wasn't a hardship if it was for the sake of the family. Of course, the time I cut back wasn't limited to just that. I also reduced the time I spent with Susan. "Why haven't you been in touch?" Susan asked me. When I explained my family's situation, she retorted, "So what? If your mom's working, that's fine, and you don't need to take care of your younger brother. She can do that when she gets back from work." I couldn't believe my ears. I was horrified that she could act so callously toward a family grieving the loss of a father, just because she felt neglected by me. I told her, I don't need a girlfriend who can't show compassion during such tough times, and broke up with Susan. I didn't want my mental stability jeopardized by her anymore. However, later at school, the story had twisted into Susan dumping me. On top of that, she spread all sorts of rumors and bad-mouthed me to everyone. I saw her true colors, but honestly, with everything going on, I just felt indifferent. To help my family out even a little, I thought about skipping high school and getting a job. My mom was against it, but after some persuasion, she tearfully gave her permission. All I can really do is physical work and study, so I thought about finding a job that would utilize those skills. On graduation day, Susan, somehow finding out I wasn't going to high school, teased me about it. "You're not going to high school." Without making eye contact, I simply replied, "Yup," and tried to distance myself from Susan. From behind, she said, "In this day and age, not going to high school. You must have such low ambitions, you'll be at the bottom forever." I figured I'd probably never see her again. No need to get worked up over someone like her, so I ignored her and left the school. Now, time has passed, and I'm currently going through domestic flight check-in procedures. I'm on a personal trip heading to Hawaii. I'm a bit embarrassed to admit that I've never been to Hawaii, so I'm really looking forward to it from deep within. My impression of Hawaii is that it has beautiful beaches and a lot of rich flavored dishes. But it's quite a far place, so I just never found the time to visit. Even thinking about sightseeing there, I'd be torn about where to go, and I probably would have just ended up staying in the hotel, which is why I never had the courage to go alone. However, one of my friends opened a restaurant. I decided to go there to celebrate. I decided to have a friend show me around Hawaii during this visit, so I planned to take my time and see the sights. I couldn't help but feel like a giddy kid with this much excitement, but oh well. I comfortably settled into my seat. There's something about the slight hustle and bustle inside the plane right before takeoff that I genuinely enjoy. I placed my carry-on under the seat and found myself gazing out the window, lost in the view outside. Even before taking off, the view from this window offered sights that you just can't see anywhere else, and I'm already a little thrilled. I must say, I snagged one of the best seats. Located a bit away from the wing, I had a clear, unobstructed view. It was just awesome. With a little time before takeoff, I let my imagination wander, picturing the breathtaking views above the clouds. The plane I'm on was pretty much full, almost packed to capacity. Yet, nobody was sitting next to me. I wonder if no one booked a seat, or maybe they were running late. Either way, I had mixed feelings. Considering how crowded it is, I feel a bit guilty enjoying this extra space all to myself. For now, I decided to just gaze out the window and ride out this awkward moment. Bang! There was a loud sound as someone hurriedly took the seat next to me. This last-minute passenger fumbled with their belongings even after sitting down, bumping their elbow into me. Yet, not a single sorry came out of her mouth. On top of that, she reeked of strong perfume and cosmetics. I hadn't encountered someone this inconsiderate since middle school. She reminded me of unpleasant people, catching a faint reflection of the adjacent seat on the window glass. I noticed something dark over her eyes. Probably sunglasses. That's all I could discern. However, wearing sunglasses on a plane struck me as rather snooty. Might be a bit judgmental, though. After some fidgeting, the classless passenger next to me sneaked a glance at my face. I inadvertently responded by looking back. I regretted it instantly. Though she was heavily made up and looked quite flashy, I had seen her before. Someone I'd rather forget. Well, if it isn't little dropout boy, how've you been? I felt a chill as I wondered if my journey, which was already taking a bad turn, would continue this way, taking off under stormy skies. If I do say so myself, that was a pretty apt comparison. Seeing my silence, she said, "Forgot about me. Surely, you haven't forgotten how I dumped you," and took off her sunglasses. It was indeed Susan from middle school, whom I dated. Her face remains strikingly beautiful, but it's clear from her first words that her attitude hasn't changed one bit. "Hasn't it been since graduation? Long time no see. Never thought I'd run into you here of all places. Flying in planes, for a dropout like you. How bold. Oh, or maybe you're off to join a tuna fishing boat." Looks like her attitude is unchanged. Good to see she's well. Susan, ever the chatterbox with her sarcastic remarks. She's so adept at belittling people that it seems she forgets to breathe, firing off insults at me one after another. Truly a piece of work, that woman. I simply replied, "Just a vacation," and focused on the view outside, wanting to minimize any further interaction with her. The plane seemed ready for takeoff and began to slowly move. I was looking forward to a pleasant flight, but now it feels like I'm plunging straight into hell because of one seatmate. I'd rather be peacefully asleep on the wing at this point. Susan seemed offended by my cold demeanor. After an audible tisk, she started rattling off things to irk me. About how awful I was as a boyfriend, how her high school boyfriend was way more handsome, how the time with me was a waste. She bombarded me with comments that begged for a response. After high school, Susan apparently married into wealth through some circumstances. I wasn't paying much attention, so all I remember is she married someone wealthy. Apparently, Susan, who hit the jackpot, is going on a luxurious trip to Hawaii. "I'm going to stay in a fancy hotel you could never afford in a lifetime and enjoy the resort," she said. By the way, her husband seems head over heels for Susan, and he revolves his life around her. Well, I guess some people are like that. I hope he cherishes Susan forever since he's a strange individual. If she ever lost him, I doubt she'd ever marry again. Tuning out Susan's self-centered chatter, it's me just going along with it. Even in moments like this, the view from the plane was breathtaking. Soon after takeoff, the view below turned completely white as we rose above the clouds. No matter how bad the weather is, if you wait a bit and rise above the clouds, a bright blue sky always shines. The beautiful blue sky always sits above the clouds, peeking through gaps to see the ground below. But I wonder, when will these neighboring clouds clear up? People like you, the lowly ones, rarely get the chance to fly, so this view must be unique to you, she mockingly says, not missing a beat. Furthermore, Susan claimed she's flown many times before and has grown tired of the same old view, so she can't be bothered to look out the window anymore. Why does she go to such lengths to degrade herself? It's good to have high self-esteem, but I just couldn't grasp why she would actively lower her worth in the eyes of others. I can't believe I once dated someone like her. If I ever have kids, I'll drill this into their heads. It's just too bad to have a blotch on one's life as early as middle school. Honestly, I find it hard to believe that just because you've flown many times, you'd get tired of the view outside. The scenery shows a different face depending on the day and time, so you'll never truly see the same view twice. Seems like such a waste to me. It was while she was passionately going on about how amazing she is. "Is there a doctor on board?" came the announcement. It's a line you often hear in TV shows, but this was the first time I've heard it in real life. I wonder if someone's fallen ill and needs medical attention. I was worried, but there wasn't anything I could do. I decided to wait quietly, but the airhead next to me had a different idea. "Wait, what's going on? It's like something straight out of a drama. What's got this woman so riled up?" Such behavior, especially when someone on board might be seriously ill and in need of a doctor. I knew it. She definitely has a few screws missing. With those thoughts, as I scanned the plane, another announcement came through. "Is there anyone on board who can pilot this plane?" Even I was taken aback by that one. When the announcement was made that a doctor was needed, passengers were a bit restless. Not as much as Susan though, but when they called for a pilot, the cabin truly erupted in commotion. Is this plane even okay with the pilot like this? And does the pilot need a doctor? Voices calling for the flight attendants could be heard throughout the cabin. It's understandable. First needing a doctor and then the pilot. Something must have happened to him. Susan's face grew increasingly pale and she began to panic. What the heck? Is this plane going to crash or what? Why does she say something unnecessary? Mentioning a crash in a situation like this could cause a full-blown panic in the cabin. That's why I dislike people who can't read the room. Unsurprisingly, a flight attendant hurried over to Susan, who was loudly using the word crash. "Ma'am, nothing of the sort will happen. Please, wait in your seat." Susan was arguing with the flight attendant, but the attendant skillfully urged her to sit back down. Then the flight attendant looked at me. "Are you by any chance Jake?" I locked eyes with her and asked, "Oh, is it that serious?" "Oh, thank goodness you are here. I'm truly sorry to ask, but can you help?" "I see, it must be a big deal." Considering she's gone this far, maybe what Susan said isn't entirely wrong. I nodded in agreement and stood up from my seat. "What are you doing? If you're just going to be in the way, better sit here and shake in your boots. The pathetic one here is you, Susan." I almost snapped back, but managed to hold my tongue. The flight attendant asked, "Is she with you?" To which I firmly denied. "Just an old acquaintance. We just happened to sit next to each other, nothing more. She's no relation to me," I explained. I wanted to head to the cockpit right away, but Susan gripped my arm tightly and wouldn't let go. "Where do you think you're going in this situation?" Even though I asked her to let go, Susan showed no intention of doing so. I was wondering what to do when the flight attendant intervened. "Ma'am, I apologize for the inconvenience, but Jake is one of our pilots. There's an urgent matter he needs to attend to." Saying that, she exerted a polite yet forceful pressure to detach Susan's hand. "You're a pilot?" Susan said, eyes wide in surprise. I replied with a simple yes and headed to the cockpit. Around the cockpit, a group of flight attendants had gathered and were visibly alarmed. I learned that both the captain and the co-pilot were showing symptoms of food poisoning. By chance, there was a doctor on board who was examining the two. However, they showed no signs of recovery, and their symptoms were getting worse. Therefore, it became clear that piloting the plane under these conditions would be challenging, leading to an urgent announcement from the cockpit. Acute gastroenteritis can strike out of the blue, so perhaps it was unavoidable. But for both of them to get gastroenteritis, that's either incredibly bad luck or a miracle. The odds seem pretty low. Many familiar faces were around the cockpit, and when they saw me, they said, "Wow, how lucky that Jake was on board too." Both pilots having gastroenteritis, a doctor happening to be on that plane, and even a pilot being present, it feels like I've used up a lifetime's worth of luck just on these astronomical odds. According to the doctor, The co-pilot's symptoms seemed milder than the captain's, but he was just barely able to hold a conversation. However, he seemed really rough with sweat on his brow. I managed to get in touch with the control tower and took my seat in the cockpit. The tension and excitement never get old. Having passengers on board brought immense pressure upon me. When I first started flying, the thought of having the lives of passengers in my hands made me so nervous I felt like throwing up. But at the same time, there was a breathtaking view that only pilots get to see. A beautiful scene that passengers can't quite experience from the cabin. The warm rays of the sun lit up the surroundings. Even the thick clouds below looked like a beautiful backdrop. That sense of exhilaration only a pilot feels always filled my heart. I often wonder if some kind of hormone is flooding my brain. Being here is pure joy. Well, for me at least. I once mentioned this to a flight attendant and was immediately dismissed as weird. I feel bad for Susan. She never experienced such a sight and still got tired of it. The plane landed safely in Hawaii, ensuring the safety of all passengers and crew on board. Immediately after that, the captain and the co-pilot headed to the hospital. The doctor who had been attending to them said, "I'm glad you were there. If I was alone, everyone would have ended up in the hospital. Just those two going is enough," chuckling and stroking his beard. What an inappropriate thing for a doctor to say. But well, he's probably trying to show his appreciation in his own way. Even though the landing was safe, from the company's perspective, it's still a big deal. As a result, after arriving in Hawaii, paperwork and reports took so long that I was only free by sunset. As initially planned, I headed straight to my friend's new shop at top speed. Of course, I drove safely. The store was already bustling with many customers. My friend and the owner, Bob, saw me and immediately burst into a wide grin, exclaiming, "Glad you could make it," and giving me a hearty pat on the back. "I heard you had quite the day, steering a passenger plane on the fly. Where did he get that info?" I didn't feel like bragging, so I hadn't intended to talk about it, but if he already knew, I guess I should explain. The forceful pat from the muscular Bob left my back tingling. Rubbing the sore spot, I sat down and recounted the day's events. "That's an incredible story. Can't believe it's been 5 years since you retired. Time flies," Bob laughed. "Indeed, the passing of 5 years does make me feel the cruel march of time." "Are you a friend of the owner?" a gentle voice inquired from behind me. Turning around, a distinguished-looking gentleman was smiling at me. Next to him was a rather, "Excuse me, Susan." Bob replied to the gentleman with a smile. "It seems he's a regular at this place. He was my buddy back in the service days. This guy was top-notch, you know. He was stationed at the Langley Air Force Base with the 4th Air Wing, 11th Flight Squadron," he explained thoroughly. I thought the gentleman wouldn't understand such detailed information, but his eyes lit up as he exclaimed, "Wait, you mean the Blue Angels?" Turns out, he had once dreamed of becoming a pilot. However, due to an accident when he was a child, he almost lost vision in his right eye and had to reluctantly give up that dream. Same as me. To remember names of aircraft, airline companies, and even military divisions, this guy must be a serious aviation enthusiast. It had been a while since I'd met someone so passionate about planes, so I couldn't help but chat animatedly with him. Even though I was here for Bob's celebration, I got sidetracked with this engaging conversation. The gentleman was particularly fond of the Blue Angels. He raved about their air shows, saying they are truly spectacular. Interrupting our heated conversation was none other than Susan. "Excuse me," she chimed in gracefully. "Oh, I'm sorry," the gentleman scratched his head. "I got a bit carried away there." I thought she didn't deserve an apology, but from their interaction, it seemed they were a couple, so I held my tongue. In the course of our chat, he learned Susan and I went to the same middle school, which once again piqued the gentleman's interest. He bombarded me with various questions. "So, where are you now?" he inquired. I told him I'm a commercial pilot. He seemed puzzled by my answer. "Well, it makes sense. Bob and I are buddies from our military days, and if you love planes, you'd naturally want to fly fighter jets. The thing is, I had a car accident a while back and couldn't fly fighter jets anymore, but I still love the sky, so I switched to the commercial sector." I explained the whole situation. 5 years ago, on a rainy day, I was crossing the street at an intersection when a car ran the red light and hit me. The driver was distracted, looking elsewhere. Though I received compensation and settled the matter, it doesn't mean I hold a grudge. However, because of that accident, I fractured my left leg and had to spend a significant amount of time in rehab. Because of this, I didn't meet the required flight hours, and I lost my pilot's license. I also developed complications from the accident, meaning I could no longer fly the more demanding fighter jets. At that time, I was truly devastated. It was a dream I had since I was a child, and my late father had always been my biggest supporter. But this was all thanks to my dad's teachings. He always used to tell me, "The past is the past. No use dwelling on it. Just do your best in the present." If I kept dwelling on the past, I wouldn't be able to achieve even what I could. When I found out I couldn't fly fighter jets anymore, the higher-ups suggested I move to a department primarily dealing with paperwork, but I couldn't give up on flying, so I left the military and transitioned to the private sector. Becoming a commercial pilot was more challenging than I expected, facing various obstacles. But I never gave up. The sky is where I belong. There's nowhere else for me. After finishing my story, Susan's husband, teary-eyed, he said, "I've never met someone as incredible as you. Your never-give-up spirit is truly admirable. Would you mind if we kept in touch?" As he took out his cell phone. I couldn't possibly refuse after such a heartfelt request. Plus, being praised felt pretty good, not gonna lie. After that, we continued to talk about planes, engrossed in our conversation. Throughout that time, Susan looked down, appearing rather diminished. Susan's husband introduced himself as Mike. He owned several properties in resort areas like Hawaii and was a well-known wealthy man in that realm. It seems that what Susan told me on the plane about marrying into wealth wasn't a lie. Honestly, I was quite skeptical. Mike, even after our meeting in Hawaii, kept in touch quite frequently and was a straight-shooter kind of guy. He had a stickler for details kind of attitude, didn't tolerate any wrongdoing, and seemed to be trusted by many. That such a man chose Susan as a life partner, I wondered if she had somehow drugged him. Then, I received a message on my phone from Susan. "Please never tell my husband that we dated in the past. Don't jeopardize my happiness," it read. For my part, I had no desire to have any more involvement with Susan. But considering Mike, maybe it would be best to spill the beans. It's quite a dilemma. However, Susan probably has some awareness that she wasn't entirely honest with me back then. I doubt her character changed just because of that plane incident, but she likely played her cards right to marry into money. If she went to those lengths, I guess I shouldn't be the one to ruin it. Although, it's quite comical when I think about it. But to be honest, even if I don't tell Mike about Susan's true nature, sooner or later, he'll see her for who she really is. Until then, I hope he enjoys the happiness he has. I replied with a simple understood. After that, I received no further messages from her. It seems Susan will continue to hide her past from her husband. In other words, she probably can't live any other way now. She likely live in fear of her past and those she harassed being exposed. That's the responsibility and consequence of her past actions. The past never truly goes away. Some time had passed since I traveled to Hawaii. I happened to bump into Mike at the airport. But the Mike I saw there looked considerably thinner and appeared quite worn out. When I spoke to him, he said that he and his wife, Susan, had divorced. Some time after the incident in Hawaii, a friend of Susan's visited their home. Due to work commitments, Mike was at home. Thinking not to disturb the two, he was working on his computer in a room next to the guest room. The visiting friend was from Susan's middle school days, and they spoke so loudly that Mike couldn't help but overhear. In between crude laughter, they mentioned people, probably classmates from middle school, using derogatory nicknames. It turned out I was one of them. Hearing Susan and her friend laughing about men with money being the best, Mike lost his temper. He stormed out of his study and yelled at them to get out right now. He tossed both Susan and her friend out of the house and didn't let them in that day. Later, he found out that Susan had been spending their savings without permission and wasting money. When confronted, Susan retorted that he was stingy for a rich man. Initially, Mike felt that if she changed, they could try again, but Susan just said things like, "I never thought you'd be so tight-fisted, and I'm embarrassed not to have designer things." Well, hearing that, I wasn't very surprised at all. The more Susan berated Mike, the further his heart drifted away from her. Mike ran out of patience and brought up divorce. Interestingly, her attitude changed drastically. She began saying things like she didn't want to split and that it was just a play on words. Did she think he wouldn't consider divorce up to this point? It seemed her mind was really only focused on herself. When Mike threatened to take her to court with a lawyer because of her persistence, she reluctantly signed the divorce papers. They continued to have disputes over the division of assets, but Mike said they finally settled everything recently. Mike sighed, "I thought she was a wonderful woman, but I never expected her true nature to be like that." I wholeheartedly agreed. It's not about appearances. While it's understandable for good-looking people to be popular when young, as adults, being with someone whose personality doesn't mesh becomes a pain, regardless of their looks. After divorcing Mike, Susan went back to her hometown and is now living with her parents. Being a stay-at-home wife before, she's having difficulty finding a work, and she's living modestly, especially since she's being asked to pay back the money she squandered. What goes around, comes around, I believe. It's not just with Mike. Throughout her life, she seemed to have looked down on others, and now it seems all that karma is coming back to her. After hearing Mike's story at the airport, I bid him farewell. As I left the airport, I looked up at the sky. Unfortunately, it was overcast. But I knew. Above the gloomy overcast sky, the clear blue stretches on endlessly. I believe that the view from the cockpit is a privilege reserved for pilots. If Susan could be moved by such sights, I think she might finally find her humanity. There are many challenges in continuing a pilot's career. But feeling motivated by the beauty of that view makes the effort worthwhile. Today, I'm determined to keep pushing forward, to witness more beautiful vistas and ensure the safety of my passengers.